Hello, friends. It's been a while. Finally, I managed to open up my laptop and turn on the camera to record something. I've been hesitating for some time to record. I had many ideas, I had big plans what I was going to do over the summer. Kind of life got in a way in many ways, and obligations were overwhelming in private aspect, but also in regarding the work that I needed to do. And just every time I thought about recording something, it I would get excited, and then the excitement would just wean off. And also, I have hit the worst reading slump in a very long time. I don't remember when was the last time that I was struggling to pick up books, or any book in general. I was just mentally not capable to focus for a longer period of time, especially during the summer. Had plans to do some vlogs. I had recorded footage and I was reading a book for that particular vlog, and then I just couldn't read it, and it's been sitting on my shelf for several months now. I read like maybe 100 pages. Have several books like that are just sitting on the shelf. I'm trying to get back to them and maybe create some vlog. I don't know what the issue was. I mean, I know like the stress of certain things that were happening at the time was so overwhelming that I just could not focus. My mind was just spinning out of control, and reading was not having this calming effect that it usually does have. And at the end of the day, it just ended up being overwhelming and tiring, like an exhausting chore that I needed to do. That's not what I want reading to be. So for several months, I maybe read like a book or two. I haven't been joyous when I think about reading. It just felt like overwhelmingly difficult to, even the books that I enjoy, I would start reading them, but then I would just get very, I don't know if it's bored. The books weren't the problem per se. I think it was just the anxiety that I was feeling over certain things that were happening at the time, and I was just not able to focus. Like I would be reading a page and then the next page, and then I wouldn't remember anything I read. It was truly awful. But as someone who gets really excited to talk about books, I haven't been excited to talk about books either, or just like the process of reading and writing. I had some ideas of what I wanted to do for this first video that I would post after such a long time, and then it just becomes, ugh, I don't know, maybe some of you have experienced that before, but it was really, really difficult. Yeah, so in case you have been here for some time, you know that I am horrible at introducing myself at the beginning of every video. So, hello, I'm Alex. I'm a PhD candidate and a big book reader, but obviously I have hit a slump in last several months. The slump has been slumping, but nevertheless, I did manage to read some books, and maybe I will try to give you a short overview of what I've read recently. Mm, So, the first book that I will talk about, this is for my PhD, and it's called Toward an Anthropological Theory of Value by David Graeber. In case you are interested in the work of David Graeber, I would not recommend that you start with this book. It is overly academic and very theoretical, especially I think like the first two chapters. This is more for people who are really interested to get into the nitty-gritty of his work, like the overly academic aspect of his work. If you would like to get to know his work, I would recommend books like Bullshit Jobs, The Debt, the recently published collection of essays, what's it called, The Ultimate Hidden Truth of the World. That would be, actually, I would recommend that book to be your starting point, even though it's the latest one that was published. And it's actually a collection of essays. Some of these works that are in there have been published in some of his previous works. Next book I read, All My Precious Madness by Mark Bowles. I had great expectations for this book, especially it's because it's dealing with the subject of academia. The protagonist is an academic who has a lot of issues with his work and life in general. I had great expectations for this book, but the problem was that the tone at times was just too general. There were aspects of the novel that seemed a little bit too mainstream, like his grumpiness was focused on this general hatred of society and maybe disdain, not hatred, for the society and just humans in contemporary or the late stage capitalism, and how they tend to become overly egocentric. There were some parts of the novel that I enjoyed. I think it's on page 83 that he talks about. I was telling a friend about this, where he talks about this culture of work and the perception that we are required to constantly show others that we are engaged in some form of productive work. And if you are not engaged and don't feel exhausted by the work that you do, then there is definitely something wrong with you. I thought that was a very, very on point part. Overall, I did enjoy it. I gave it 3.75 stars. I usually don't give such low score to books, but yeah, this one was bothering me. I think I went and I corrected my I think I gave it a 4, and then I went and corrected the stars to 3.75. I think I would give it maybe even 3, but that just seemed mean in a way. I don't know. I feel like if an author has put in an effort to write something, maybe it wasn't a good time for me, and giving these stars, it doesn't necessarily do much. Maybe give some kind of guidance to readers, but otherwise, yeah, I don't know. I feel uncomfortable giving like 3 stars to books, even the ones that I didn't like. I don't know why. Maybe that's a question for my psychotherapist. And the next one is a collection of poems by Terance Hayes, so to speak. I read part of this poetry collection at the beginning of the year, and the other part I was reading more recently. I think it was like August, September, and I enjoyed it. It is an experimental poetry collection. It has a lot of interesting themes and concepts that is exploring. And if you are interested in contemporary poetry, it's also a rather short collection. It's 112 pages. So if you're interested to read some poetry and maybe explore a contemporary poet that is not as well known. At least I don't think he is. Maybe I'm not. I'm not too involved in the poetry circles, especially the US poetry circles, so I wouldn't know. But my assumption is that he's not an established poet. Sorry, Terence, if I made a mistake, if I made that assumption. Next book is What I'd Rather Not Think About by Jente Posthuma. She is a Dutch author, and this book, trigger warning, it explores a suicide. It's the narrator is this young woman who has a twin brother who committed suicide, and essentially the whole book is an exploration of their relationship and how it came to a point that she didn't see the signs that her brother was struggling so much that she wouldn't and that he was struggling so much that she didn't notice and wasn't able to give in the appropriate care that he might have needed. Although I think at times she tends to fall in this, which is quite normal for people who have lost someone in immediate family or friend circle to suicide, to blame themselves. But it's very interesting to see the evolution of their relationship, and she explores that quite well in the novel. I really, really enjoyed it, even though it's a devastating and very painful thing to read about. I was at times crying when I was reading it, and at the same time, I felt like it was something that really contributed to my understanding of the pain that people who are left behind after someone chooses to end their life, and their ways of coping with it and those around them. It's really a devastating book, but at the same time, I felt it was beautifully written. Next one is a little bit of a lighter read. It's Miss March by Virginia Feito or Feito. I'm not sure how you pronounce the last name, sorry. I've had this book on my shelves for I think 3 or 4 years. It was recommended by Jen, and I wanted to read it for a long time, but then for some reason I just ended up postponing. Nevertheless, I read it, I enjoyed it. It's really a book that explores a journey of one woman's madness. And the ending, I did not anticipate it to end that way, even though obviously, like, it was building up to that kind of logical ending, because there was no other solution to the situation that Miss March finds herself in. But it was really gripping, and it really pulled me in, and I loved Miss March's moments of complete, spiraling and out of control, and just kind of moments of complete madness, I would say. It was an interesting read, and I heard back few years ago that this was supposed to be turned into a film or a TV show, and who was supposed to act? What's the name of that actress? Um, Hold on. The name, yeah, Elizabeth Moss was supposed to be playing Miss March, and I thought she would be perfect for the role. And while I was reading it, I was actually imagining her as Miss March the whole time. Then the next book I read was The Ultimate Hidden Truth of the World by David Graeber. Like I said, It's a really interesting collection of his work, and I highly recommend it. If you haven't read anything from him before, I would suggest that you start with this book. Next book that I read is called Spectres of Fascism: Historical, Theoretical, and International Perspectives, edited by Samir Gandesha. I was reading this book for the article that I was working on in August, September, and October. Off and on, I didn't work for whole 3 months. I had an idea that I started kind of brainstorming several months ago, and this was one of the books that I used for in order to understand contemporary form of fascism. The article is more complex, but this book, I bought it, I think, in 2022, and it's been sitting on my shelf. I didn't read it. I read other contemporary authors who explore neo-fascism, but this one was like a very diverse collection of contributions by different authors. I didn't feel like it really gave any valuable contribution to the topic of neo-fascism. The only good thing from it is actually the introductory chapter, which was written by the editor, and I thought that was a really good overview of how fascism has mutated, has changed over the course of 7-8 decades since the end of Second World War. In that context, I would just recommend, if you can access it in a digital format, if you're interested, the introductory chapter has a really good overview of some debates regarding how to theorize fascism and neo-fascism that have been going on for around 100 years now. So in that aspect, that's the only valuable thing in the book. The rest of the chapters are not as good, and they don't really offer any valid contribution to the scholarship on fascism. In my opinion, as someone who has read many other works on fascism, this was a rather weak book for me. And final book that I read is The Coming Bad Days by Sarah Bernstein. I had this book also on my shelf, I think, for about a year. Cassie was someone, oh no, Cassie? I forgot. She was the one who read it and reviewed it. And again, this is a book that deals with the subject of academia. I thought it was really, really well written. It has these short chapters that you can really read fast. I thought it explored very well the isolation that you experienced as a PhD candidate, the kind of academic and social isolation that you experience simply because of the nature of the work. And also this imposter syndrome that we in academia experience, where you kind of are doubting yourself a lot of the time, and whether the work that you do has any value, and whether you are doing it the way you're supposed to do it. It's something that I've experienced this year in particular, because I was embarking on my own ethnographic research for the first time. I've never done anything like that, and I had a lot of thoughts and feelings about it. I didn't know whether I was doing it correctly, whether it's possible to do it, if there is there is obviously no one correct way to do it, but in particular in my own case, because I really had to readjust my research accordingly. And through the experience of that first research trip, I had understood that kind of different situations ask for different approaches. So I had to, with different participants in my own research, I had to readjust the approach that I was using. And that, of course, is learned only through practical aspects. The narrator of this particular novel is not a social scientist. She is a PhD candidate in literature, and she is exploring who is she exploring? Hold on a second. Paul Celan, I think. Yes, poet Paul Celan. And I thought it was a very interesting way, the way Sarah brought in the exploration of the works of Paul Celan that the protagonist does, and how this exploration in return is affecting her own life, her private life, how these contemplations for her academic work are actually being kind of swung back at her to the private sphere, and how the difficulties that she has in her academic work are also presenting in her private life. Overall, I thought the book was really good. I enjoyed it a lot. Highly recommend it. So, how many books overall? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So these are the 8 books that I read since summer. It's not a lot, but I'm hoping that maybe I will manage to have a bit more time in the next month and a half to read something for pleasure. I don't know if any of you are interested in a book haul. I have been, of course, buying books, even though I haven't been reading as much, which is something that I kind of understand that it's a coping mechanism. When it comes to stress, I was overcompensating for certain things, and that's good and bad at the same time. But yeah, if you're interested in a book haul, I can do that. I was on a short vacation trip in Berlin, and I visited some bookstores there, so I can do the book haul from the books with the books that I got in Berlin. So thank you for sticking around and being patient while I get my S together. And I hope you stick around still. Please do let me know in the comments what you have been reading, if you have read anything interesting. What are your thoughts about the books that you read recently, and if you have any additional things that you would like to share, your own experience, maybe struggles with the reading slumps. It's greatly appreciated if you engaged with the content. And I will see you in the next one. Hopefully not in 3 or 4 months, but maybe in a couple of weeks. Have a good day and a good beginning of next week. Bye.
Mut. Oh. Muti.